welcome back to Ellie's Culture Craving. It's been a hot minute since I filmed on this channel. A lot has happened since I filmed my Dark Academia book tag, which has been really popular. Thank you so much for your support on this video over the past couple of weeks. It really means a lot to me that this channel has some viability. And so today I'm going to talk to you about every single thing I've watched on Netflix since the start of lockdown. So I'm kind of classing that as March to April. I know we're probably about to have a second lockdown, we're just going to move past that. But basically this is everything I've watched on Netflix, and I'm going to tell you kind of what I thought, whether I finished it, what I liked about it, and so on. So, you may have seen this book before, but this is my book where I record everything that I've read, and I've just decided in the back to include everything that I watch or listen to. Not music, I mean like podcasts and audiobooks, that kind of thing. And so far in 2020, I've watched 35 TV series and films on Netflix. I haven't counted anything outside of Netflix like Now TV, Disney Plus, etc., because I've watched a lot of those as well. This is specifically Netflix. I'll go from the start of March. The first thing that I watched in March was the film Clueless, an absolute 90s classic. I still love dressing like Cher. I've watched this film hundreds of times. If you haven't watched it, it's basically a reimagining of Jane Austen's Emma in an American high school with a very rich young girl who is basically trying to work out who she is, and she's very cool and I want to be her. The next thing I watched was the series I Am Not Okay With This, which has got the girl from It in it, and this was really dark. I would say this is a reimagining of Carrie. It definitely drew on Carrie vibes. It has telekinesis. I've got no idea if I just said that right. The violent aspects of Carrie are very much retained in this, but it's also a story of adolescence, growing up, sexual awakenings, and I think it had a very real representation of young people's relationships with their bodies, and not everyone was perfect in this, which you often get in teenage stuff, or they're like, oh, I'm not perfect, but they are, which is really frustrating. But no, they were actually quite realistic looking teenagers in this show. Doctor Who is one of my all-time favourite shows, and in lockdown I watched season 3, season 5, season 6, series 7 and series 4, and I think a little bit of series 2, but I haven't got that written on here. Love is Blind. I don't really watch reality TV particularly. It's not something that I've overly indulged in my years, but this one, I found it so interesting how people genuinely chose to get married having never met each other. How can you take that risk? I mean, to be fair, all of them were gorgeous people, but there were some pretty drama-filled moments, which I really enjoyed. I think the heteronormativity of reality TV shows actually really bothers me. There's very little representation on reality TV of LGBTQ plus people. Like, not everyone who's trying to find someone is straight. Yeah, I guess that kind of bothers me. And I think it would be a lot more fun if there was some reality TV of people of different sexualities. Paper Towns was one of my favourite films when I was 2015, and it actually really inspired me to become a completely different person. It really made me think about my mortality in a way, and I created lots of bucket lists, like literally just reels and reels of things that I wanted to do before I died. And it was like, oh my god, I'm never going to be able to do X or Y thing, and it really quite depressed me in a way, but it also really inspired me to make some plans of where I want to travel and what I want to achieve. And I think if it wasn't for that, I may have not even got to university. I might not have gone to Culford. I think it inspired a take what you can sort of attitude from me, where I was just like, I am going to do so many things. And I don't know why, because Paper Towns isn't really like that. I was more inspired by the trailer than the book or the film. The trailer itself just really got me thinking about the way everyone lives their lives and kind of how I wanted to live a different kind of life, and I didn't want it to be small, basically. And so watching it again is always very nostalgic for me. Line of Duty, I kind of only got a little bit in, but I really liked it, so it's definitely one I'm going to come back to. Safe is a sort of I remember really enjoying it, but genuinely right now cannot tell you anything that happens. I think a girl goes missing. It's kind of like her dad is looking for her. It was a really good Netflix show. I think it was based in the UK. It's just a nice UK sort of crime drama. It was classic and I really enjoyed it. Tiger King bothered me at levels I literally cannot express. It distressed me so much. I'm very much a lover of animals. We have several kinds of pets. I've grown up in the countryside seeing animals all my life, wild animals especially, and knowing that it's not illegal to have a tiger, as like that anyone can just keep them in the US, is just so messed up to me. I understand that US is a very free place, but I don't think that should be at the expense of animals who are just living their lives. Oh, it hurts me a lot. And seeing these people play with these little tiger babies like they're cats, it's just so obviously not okay to me. Joe Exotic and Carol Baskin, just the drama of like 12-year-olds between them, I think it just really pissed me off and I just couldn't handle it. So I think I got to almost the very last episode, but just the level of weird and wacky and just a craziness with all the guns and the shootings and the lying and the like, how are people this mad? As an English person, someone who is very English, it was just slightly maybe too emotional for me, which is not something I ever thought I'd say. I just don't think I could cope with the childishness of it, the immaturity. I just could not deal. Dairy Girls is an amazing TV show. Really enjoyed it. I think it's so funny and it's kind of got a teenage girl spot on, but it's also just very real. And I actually learned a lot about the Irish culture that I didn't otherwise know. Skins, I got a couple of episodes in. I think on the one hand it does have quite a good representation of young people in the UK. It's got a lot of UK teenage culture in it that I really appreciate, but also there's not a lot of joy in it, so I find it quite heavy to watch and I'm not really sure where it sits in my life. I'm not sure what need I have for it because I don't really have a lot of those kind of problems in my world. I don't have that kind of instability in my life, and so I don't particularly find it cathartic. Miss Americana, I obviously watched the day it came out. I'm a huge Swift fan, if you didn't know. I feel like my thoughts on Miss Americana are very, I think Taylor Swift's understanding of politics is on some level quite simplistic, but also as a Swift fan, I absolutely adored getting to see the behind the scenes. I think her discussions on her eating disorder are so important because as a young girl I used to look at Taylor Swift and I never really personally thought about how thin she was until now, until that kind of matters to me, and now I notice how skinny Taylor Swift was and it is quite distressing. And the fact that she's revealed that she had an eating disorder and that your life isn't perfect because you're skinny, I think that's a very important thing to share. I think her and Jamila Jamil would get along a lot. I thought it was really interesting, and I really loved them bringing out clips that I haven't seen for years. Like there's one shot of her in this blue sort of dress and red lipstick and curly hair that I had on my wall for years and I'd forgotten that image existed, and they put in some video footage of that and I was like, whoa, and it all just came back to me being 11, just adoring her. Merlin, I actually only officially finished last night because I refused to watch the last 2 episodes because I don't know how I knew, but I just had a feeling that it was going to be very traumatic. I am in love with Arthur. As someone who loves Doctor Who, I feel like Merlin was an obvious thing I should have watched in my life, but I never liked it as a child, probably because it was a little bit too much like Doctor Who, and Doctor Who is the best. So I just could never really get into it. But it's so me, witches, fairies, medieval princes and princesses, like that was so my jam. I don't know why I didn't watch it as a child, but I really liked it and had quite a lot of subtle adult hints in it as well, which are always pleasing. Crashing is a series with Phoebe Waller-Bridge. I adored Fleabag. It's one of my favourite shows ever. I think it was so poetic, and I'm not going to rant about Fleabag because we're talking about Crashing. Crashing was really funny. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, her character is really different to her one in... Well, it's got similarities to Fleabag, but, you know, she's a bit of a mess. She says what she thinks, and, yeah, in that way they are quite similar. But it's got some really interesting... It's got a Claire type character. It came, I think, a lot before Fleabag, and I think it's very clear kind of maybe how that grew into Fleabag. It's got some great LGBT representation. It explores the journey of a man, explores his potential feelings for another man, and homoerotic tensions in a little love triangle, which is really fun. And then there's another little love triangle, and basically they all live in this hospital, this like old discarded hospital, because they all have no money and they're all just trying to figure out their 20s and what they want to do in life. Yeah, I really enjoyed it. It was really fun. Mamma Mia, obviously a classic. The Truman Show, it's the first time I ever watched it. It was very Black Mirror-y to me, as you slowly realise what's happening. I highly recommend it to anyone. I thought it was such an amazing film. It's basically about this guy called Truman who was born on TV and is living in this little TV reality show without knowing it. And I think it's such an interesting exploration of how we're using media and, you know, how much of like reality TV is real. And I think that's a question that we're always asking when we're watching reality TV, but this was a good example of how that can go wrong. Slenderman, me and my boyfriend, the one sort of film genre that we both really like watching together is horror. We really like watching horror films. And so we're quite used to horror films by now. Not much scares us anymore. We've seen horrific and really great horror films. But this one, for some reason, even though it's not even 18, it was just really scary. I think a lot of it was very psychological. It really got us for some reason. The Business of Drugs is a documentary on Netflix, and it kind of goes through how different drugs are made and where they're made. It was a really, really interesting documentary, and it kind of explores the people's lives and the places that are really affected by the drug trade negatively, and how there are certain things being put into place to counteract the negative effects of the drug trade in places like Cambodia. The Fresh Prince of BelAir, I watched it when I was younger and then stopped watching when the mother actress got replaced, which is a really interesting story. It's basically, she wanted a system like Friends, where all the main characters on the show received equal pay, but Will Smith basically said no, and so she decided to leave the show. Proper feminist statement, and I love it. So I tried to watch Fresh Prince of BelAir again, but I just didn't particularly find it that interesting. Like, I tried to watch it from season 4, and I just felt like something had changed, and I don't feel like the show develops that much. The Haunting of Hill House, I've tried to watch so many times because I feel like I'm really going to enjoy it, but I've just never been able to get past the first couple of the first episode even. I don't know if it's too long, like there's no motivation for me to keep watching, or if it's just not scary enough for me. Please let me know if I should carry on with it. OMG, we are ending on a high. I watched this when I went to Cornwall, so I am counting that as the end of sort of my lockdown period, and that is The Good Place. The Good Place, I was absolutely obsessed with it. I watched it in a matter of days. I just adored it. I loved all the characters. I loved seeing the progression. I thought every single episode and season had a point, which I think is very rare in these kind of shows. I felt like because it was funny, they could have kept it going, but they made a stand by ending it at season 4, and the end broke me. It just broke me. I felt like the characters really, they just developed so well, and there were so many twists and turns that I genuinely did not predict, and it just blew me away. And I think it really changed my outlook on the world as well, and what I want to do with my life. And you know, at this point I'd become very focused on perhaps being an entrepreneur, and since then what I want to do in my life has sort of changed, and I kind of realised that I don't just want to make money, and if I do want to do entrepreneurship, it's going to be making something helpful to people, not just businesses or myself. But I don't think that's what I want to do. Like, I think I want to do journalism and tell people stories. I think that's what I'm made to do. It's probably going to change in a month. But right now, I think that's the kind of thing I'd like to do. And I think that is partially impacted by The Good Place. So genuinely a life-changing program. Okay, thank you so much for watching this. I hope you've enjoyed. Please let me know what you've been watching on Netflix in the comments. I will see you next time.